I want to first introduce you, Miss Vicki, and some of you all are joining us for the part two of our organic farming, but I'm just so elated to have Miss Vicki Morrone from Michigan State University. I'm so glad that she reached out to want to share her expertise on organic farming. And I would turn it over to you, Miss Vicki.
Excellent. I apologize for the delay, technical difficulty, and I'm barely able to see the sun. The sun's so bright, I'm not going to complain. This is Michigan. We don't always get our sun. So today I'm going to share with you kind of a part two, but definitely if you didn't participate last week, it's no loss because the information is very relevant as a standalone, as well as an intricate part of, I'm sorry, I'm trying to adjust my camera, as an intricate part of just overall organic farming, whether it's certified or not. And if the certification part you're interested in, please do listen to last week's recording. So cover crops, what are they and why bother? Because they are cover crops. They are not a cash crop. And that's real important to remember when you're planning, when you've got to work out your budget and your time and your labor and your equipment and your space, your land. And you can see we've got some radishes, forage radishes in the upper left here. And those are great for animals. If you have any pasture animals, they can feed, but they also serve as a cover crop. So you see what I'm alluding to? You can have a cover crop that's multi-purpose. And here is the vegetation from the mustards. There's several types of mustards, so consult with your seed dealer or a good catalog, even Johnny's and such. They give great descriptions and they're very helpful if you give them a phone call. We have buckwheat. If you grow bees, you should not consider buckwheat. It's lovely and it's good for weed competition and it's a quick grower in the summertime, maybe like between your spring crop and your fall crop. And then on our far right, we have a crop that's intercropped with wheat and clover, and it's beautifully managed. And I put these two on top of each other to show the contrast of a mixture. One is well prepared soil, and they did a stale bed method, which means they, right before they planted, they did a shallow cultivation, and then they planted their seed. And then they had a seeder that had two hoppers or two places to put the seed, and one for the clover and one for the rye, so they could be sure to have it the right depth. Whereas you look below, what a mess. We have lamb's quarters. We have, oh yeah, there's a little bit of clover. There's a lot of weeds. And so this is real important to have your land prepared. This is the problem here. It was quick and dirty. It was 2018 when we had all that rain and we were trying to get in between rains to get a cover crop in, because you don't till on wet soil because you destroy your tilth, you destroy your aggregates. And so we were working against Mother Nature, and I think she won that year. So what is a cover crop? It's a plant that's grown primarily for its environmental services. And what's that fancy environmental services mean? Worms. Worms are a good guy, right? We want more worms. We want less grubs. We want more mycorrhizae and less fungus that hurts the plants, that infects the plants. So that's what they mean by environmental services, things that provide good environment for your crop. And it benefits the soil as the roots of the cover crops channel or dig through the soil and help break up clods. They help break up hard pans. The nutrients from the roots, these plant physiologists have these fancy terms about roots, but basically it's like root juice, root saliva. It sloughs off into the soil and it feeds the microbes. It's full of sugars. And the microbes say, yum, yum, yum. They grow, they reproduce. There's more of them. They're helping to cycle that green stuff that you planted, known as cover crop, into nutrients so that it's available for your next year's season. And then if you have a season that's you planted all this lovely stuff, you put on your manure in the fall and you think everything's hunky-dory, and then the season stunk. You had really hot, like this year it's really hot. We had a lot of flower abortion on our peppers and tomatoes. We didn't get the production we wanted on some of our crops. So what happens to that nitrogen from the manure or from compost that you applied? Where does it go? Well, let's keep it from going into the groundwater and get that cover crop on in the fall to hold on to that residual nitrogen, that leftover nitrogen. Typically, a cover crop is not harvested, but encouraged to grow, then turned into the soil before next growing season. And the important word here is typically, because I showed you the forage radish, I showed you buckwheat. Yes, you could even harvest a little bit of the buckwheat for the grain if you're into local flours, you know, FLOUR and FLOWERS, both kinds of flours. But the cover crops can offer lots of different things, and we'll be talking about that a little bit. And the worm says hi. So types of cover crops. I don't know about your screen, but that's not the greatest quality here, and I'm very sorry. But we have the brassicas, like your mustard, your oilseed radish, and we have, I can't even tell what that is. That's a horrible picture. So we have, these are different types of things like, they call them forbs, you know, like sunflowers and buckwheats. And then we have clovers, and clovers are lovely because they fix nitrogen. They're a legume. And then we have mixtures, and mixtures are good, but they're expensive and they're sometimes a little tricky. You have oats here, the brown seed, the red seed is a pea, and the little black seeds, let's see, what is that? That is vetch. And vetch is lovely for vegetable farmers who don't mind a few volunteers. It is not good if you grow wheat as a cash crop, because its seed is too much like a wheat seed. And when it comes time to harvest, you get contamination, seed contamination. So our cover crop families, that's what we're kind of basically basing on. We can't talk about each individual cover crop, but we can kind of group them into clusters or families. Legumes, those are the guys that fix nitrogen, and we grow them primarily because they improve soil fertility. Grasses, oats, your wheats, your rye, your barleys, all can be grown as cover crops or a cash crop, or you could be creative and figure out how to do both. But they suppress weeds because you see how dense they are. There's no light coming into the ground, and they hold the soil. Rye, if you have never grown a cover crop, I hope that you'll grow rye. Try it. That's the best first time cover crop. And there's a lot of farmers who, once they have success, that's it. There's don't go back. Every year they grow rye. Maybe it's time to be creative, but and look at your different goals. But rye is cheap, can be planted now till, even now in Michigan, till maybe Thanksgiving, and still do well in the spring. And it's readily available. Just remember, if you're organic and any of these seeds, you want them not to be treated, because treated seed will, whether you're certified or not, it's typically not the way that you want to go for organic, and definitely not the way if you're certified. And brassicas, remember, brassicas are things like cabbages and broccolis. And in this case, we have mustard growing as a cover crop. A lot of us in Michigan grow mustard for a leaf, for a vegetable, for salad or stir fry. But brassicas are nice in that they suppress weeds. They're called biofumigation, and they put off a chemical that is broken down to the soil when you turn it into the soil, and it suppresses pests, insects, diseases, even nematodes. It helps a bit. So different crops, remember, every crop we see above ground, we say, oh, that's its leaf and that's its seed head, but it has different roots, and different roots support different microbes. And if you have a diverse community, just like us people, if we're diverse out here, we're a lot better off. We have more ideas, we have more progress, and we have more support to each other. The same in the soil. We have more progress for new microbes. One microbe is good at one type of suppression or one type of nutrient cycling, while the other nutrient microbe is good at other things. So we all have our values, and therefore you need a diverse community of soil microbes. So diversity, think about it. What do we eat? Do we only eat corn on the cob? Well, in the middle of the summer, I kind of would like to, but I know that that's not good for me. So I go diversity, right? So just like us, we need different microbes, and they all have different food requirements or nutrient requirements to keep alive. So just think of that as your plate when you go through the assembly line of food. When you're choosing, don't just choose the chips and salsa. Go for the diversity of the gamut, the reds, the yellows, the greens, and the browns in your foods, just like little guys like in your soil. So a cover crop, why do we value it so much? Why is there so much excitement about it? It holds soil in its place. I mean, erosion is huge. We all know it takes 100,000 years to produce an inch of soil. Well, I don't have 100,000 years left, that's for sure. And I can't wait for that inch of soil to be replaced. So it's my duty as a farmer to make sure it stays there. It's my duty as somebody who wants to make money on a healthy crop to make sure the soil stays there. And the roots is what holds that soil in place. It helps to build beneficial soil microbes like we just discussed. And it breaks up a hard pan and soil crusting. So if you have some clay in your soil, this is really important because that crusting will keep your seed from germinating, especially important with beans. Beans that really don't have much push to them. And if it's a crusty soil, they'll just stay below and try to sprout underground and die. A hard pan is sometimes for mechanical, or sometimes just Mother Nature threw a sheet of clay in your soil. And either way, you need to break through so that your roots can get access to the water and nutrients below that hard pan surface. So cover crops will provide nutrients and through like legumes and any green parts. Of course, everything green has got nitrogen in it. If you turn it in when it's green, it recycles it into the soil. And it provides an access to nutrients through what? Through the almighty roots. I love roots. Roots, did my research on roots, and it's a pain in the neck to dig. But boy, they are wonders. They do incredible stuff. How they manage to get through soils that you think nothing can get through, and they do it. And then they provide nutrients and water and structure to the plant in the time of wind or heavy rains. So the better your soil, the better your roots. The better your roots, the more resilient your crop is to adverse situations. Drought, excess rain, winds, staggered growth because of heat waves. It really makes a huge difference. And here's an economic opportunity possibly is provides a source of mulch. If it saves you money because you need mulch around your vegetables to reduce the weeds and hold on to the water, or you actually sell it as mulch, straw mulch. And it really is a valuable tool in farming and gardening. The challenges, yes, we've got to talk about challenges. Well, do you need to grow cover crops if you don't have enough land? They're going to take up field space. Now I could be planting a crop. The cost of seed, is it worth it? I get no return. I'm not taking not bailing it up and taking it to the market. So where's my money return? And then the time and labor to plant and till it. Do I have the equipment and do I have the time? And like I showed that picture earlier, those weeds, you have to manage it well, plan well to avoid the new weeds. Prepare your soil bed so that you don't have these problems. What is the virtues of the whole plant? We have the roots. You've heard me talk about roots. And here, this is a legume, a clover that is growing very well and producing beautiful nodules. These are these little round things. To those who use rosary beads, you can kind of think of it as a rosary bead. And your prayers have been answered when you see lots of them. The spheres are filled with nitrogen. They'll break down, recycle, and be available the next season in part. Roots push through soil, helping with that hard pan and reduce that crusting. Some plants have special relationship with something called mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae is a beneficial bacteria that has a specific host, meaning the mycorrhizae that attaches to the blueberry will not be the same mycorrhizae that attaches to a tomato plant. This interaction is beneficial and provides nitrogen in addition to carrying nutrients. So what about Oops, I forgot to change the picture. Sorry. Well, leaves. Large leaves cover soil to compete with weeds, and I'm very sorry. Oops, let's see if I can go back. Okay. Some cover crops can be used as hay, and that's like, for example, a sorghum Sudan grass can be used as a hay. Brassica leaves contain a chemical. I mentioned that earlier. It's called glucosinolate, and it reduces diseases and insects and even nematodes. Cover crop characteristics are important to keep in mind when you're choosing your cover crops, when you're choosing your seed. Legumes, they fix nitrogen. Examples are clovers, peas, and vetch. Grasses, things like oats and rye, deep, fine roots that can really access nutrients that are deep down. And then forbs, like buckwheat, sorghum, Sudan grass, they grow fast. They grow in the summer. All of these are summer annuals in the northern part of the US, where we get a real frost freeze. So that's an organic tool that can't be stated too quietly. It's very important. Helps you to kill the plant, even if you have a cold spells in more southern areas. That'll slow that plant down and help you so you have ability to incorporate it before it gets too big. Perennial can be cut several times. Perennial means it grows more than 1 year without being replanted. And an example of this is alfalfa and white clover. These are both legumes, so they fix nitrogen. And that winter kill, like I mentioned, we have buckwheat, oats, daikon radish. These are all typically winter killed in cold seasons, in cold areas with cold, real winters. I would say from central Ohio up north. Even these days, Seattle area. I mean, I have in-laws that live in Seattle, and they're getting they're getting more snow than we are in Michigan. Climate change. Keep your ears open. We'll see what happens. Just be ready at the starting block with that seed and ready to get it in the field. So legumes are probably the most appreciated of all the cover crops because they fix nitrogen. It's that sort of free nitrogen to your crops. And it does that through a special relationship. And it's a rhizobium, which is a bacteria that's in the soil, but you could also help it. I'll talk about that in a bit. We have crimson clover. It's it's typically a fast annual. These days with climate change, even in Michigan, it's becoming overwintering. But, some years it's that, some years it is. Then we have red clover, and that's in the Midwest. That's a favorite of many organic farmers because it's robust. You see that big flower? Well, it has bigger leaves than, say, a crimson. So you get a better soil coverage, less weed challenges. And then we have alfalfa. That's a perennial. It's a cheap seed for being a perennial. Many people come to me and say, hey, I've just managed to get some land. I need to get a handle on the weeds. What can I do? I'm not going to be able to farm for a couple more years. I need to keep my job for my 40-hour, 50-hour job till I get enough cash saved up. What can I do? Plant alfalfa. Alfalfa is affordable. It's a perennial, so you can mow it and let it break down, or you can mow it, and even if you have the equipment, to bale it and sell it as an alfalfa hay. Animals that need alfalfa hay are like dairy cows and horses. They need the higher protein. And hairy vetch is one of, I think, the gardener's favorite because it's beautiful. It meanders. It's kind of viney. But like I said, if you grow wheat, be careful. Its seed contamination can cause problems. And you can see the return on each of these in terms of pounds per acre of nitrogen. It's usually in the second year. The first year, you get about half of that. It takes time to break down. It takes those microbes, they're not the 14-year-old boys. They're the 30-year-old women. They slow and digest and meditate and relax, and then they break down, create nitrogen. Grass cover crops have value because they don't fix nitrogen, but they hold on to that excess nitrogen. They can be grown beautifully as a cover mix, like with with vetch and with rye. You see a mixture here. They're gorgeous together, as you can see, but they're very complementary. The roots of the rye go deep, providing access to nutrients and water. The vetch will fix nitrogen, and it doesn't the vetch is very sparse, so you'd have a problem with weeds if you did pure vetch, but because the rye is there, you get good weed competition. And then grasses, they have deep fibrous roots. I mean, I worked with a perennial wheat or an intermediate wheatgrass, which is, intermediate wheatgrass is known for a forage, but we developed it as a grain, and it has roots as deep as 18 feet. We've I don't know who did the digging, and I'm sorry for that, but we've shown it. Oats are probably the favorite of all the grasses for organic farmers. They say it mellows the soil. It will provide some good organic matter, but not too much nitrogen to the point where you're getting an imbalance. And it frost kills, so that's your friend in an area where you can get a good frost, so you don't have to worry about that management in the spring. It will frost kill, lay down, and serve as a mulch over winter. And then in the spring, it starts to break down and you incorporate it beautifully. It just makes lovely soil. So non-legumes like forbs, like sunflowers and buckwheats, are those roots. We can never give enough credit to those roots. They do wonders. Now you have to choose your cover crop. You have to figure out what is it that you want. Where does it fit into the crop rotation? We call that a window of opportunity. After your last crop is harvested in the fall, you could possibly plant it. Brassicas, tomatoes if they're early enough. And it depends where you are in the US or in the world, really. Before fall planting of cabbages. After your spring crop comes out, throw in a cover. A quick cover would be a buckwheat, a longer term one, maybe a mustard combined with some clover. And remember, you can turn things in anytime you want. Just the more green matter you get, the more benefit. But you want to do it before it sets seed so you don't have a problem. So you don't have a challenge with it becoming a new weed. And of course, you can grow in between the early and late crops. So planting your cover crop, you have to decide how, it depends on your land size, of course, how are you going to plant it? You can broadcast it with a handheld broadcaster, or if you have an ATV, this is a popular way for, up to 60 acres farmers plant with this easily. And this is how they frost seed in the winter. That means like around February, you'll when the soil is hard. Of course, we're talking where it's hot, not Alabama probably, but Ohio on up. You can do frost seeding using an ATV. And notice those wide wheels that reduces compaction, and it's a small unit, so there's not much weight. And you do that in the morning when the ground is frozen, and then as it starts to thaw in the afternoon, that heaving will sort of like self-planting. It's very cool. You can hand sow your walkways in your garden. Use white clover since it can be mowed and tolerates foot traffic easily. Use a seed drill that fits into your field and can be pulled by whatever tractor you have. The big farmers, they use aerial application, and they can even seed that when the crops are growing. Like in corn, they do it when the corn is just starting to tassel. So there's many ways, but of course, with every legume, please don't forget to inoculate. And this is this little black powder that you mix a little bit of water and seed, and you mix it up, and then that has the bacteria that I mentioned, the rhizobium. And it's true, most soils have some rhizobium, but if you're going to pay all that money for legumes, you want to get the biggest bang for your buck. So this is, $5 compared to 1 pound of seed might be $7, $8, depending on what you're buying. Inoculate the legume and follow the directions. And what I do is I have a 5-gallon bucket of seed. I pour in about 2 cups of water, and then I sprinkle the inoculum, and then I take a trowel and I just stir it all up, and then I throw it in the seeder. It's pretty easy. And you do it the day of, just before you're planting. You don't let it sit around. If you have a leftover inoculate, seal it up, throw it in the fridge till next time. It'll keep for a couple of years if you keep it in the refrigerator. So cover crop management tools, management decisions, you have to Find a good source of seed, talk to the people, and it's not always a guarantee. We found out this year, we got some seed from a very reputable source and it failed us. Find the right window. When can you plant it? As I mentioned, the window is the time when you can plant your cover crop seed, in between or after or before your cash crops. Know how to plant it. Know the planting rate. Know how to terminate it, meaning how to kill it and when. Of course, we don't use Roundup, so it's a lot of cultivation. A weed whip works well if you have a smaller piece of land. If your plants have gotten a bit big, a weed whip with the blade will work fine. I've used mulching mowers, lawn mowers on it. Sometimes I walk through with it held up a little bit, like it's doing a wheelie, but we get the job done. So when you do have a frost kill, like you have these oats here, it serves as a mulch. Here you have nice corn coming up without weed problems, without having to cultivate that in that early spring. You could get your seeds in as soon as the soil was warm and you didn't have to cultivate. Use a weed whacker, cut down those oats. A brush hog is also a really nice tool for smaller areas. If you're in the farm market business and you have long rows, this is beautiful. Now you need to get the pieces lined up. Planning to grow, you need to get the inoculum and make sure it's the right kind of inoculum, because different legumes use different types of inoculum, different bacteria. Learn where to buy it or to purchase it, whether it be mail order or seed store or from another organic farmer. Organic farms who are certified can sell you organic seed. If an organic farm is in transition, it cannot be considered organic seed. Don't forget, with seed, you need to verify 3 places, 3 possible sources for that organic seed. If in the end you cannot find organic, you can use untreated non-GMO. So how will you plant it? Are you going to broadcast it like we showed? Are you going to frost seed it? Are you going to drill it? That's a decision to make, and drilling is always the most effective. If you have expensive seed, it's worth trying to secure a drill, and whether you have to borrow it or rent it or modify a tool that you have right now, but it's really worth it. And this is probably the key resource for cover crops. It's cover crops profitably, and it provides incredible information and tables like you see here on the right, sharing with you, is it a legume? What's the total nitrogen it can produce? How much dry matter per acre do you expect? Is it a nitrogen scavenger? That means that's that nitrogen that was left over from the crop. Is it good at holding on to it? Is it a soil builder? Is it helping you build that organic matter? Does it fight erosion? Is it a weed fighter, meaning it's really competitive and it provides a dense canopy so you're not getting a lot of light to your soil underneath the cover crop that can trigger weed germination? Can you use it for grazing? There's your multi-use, one of them anyway. And it's a quick establishing, quick growth. Excuse me. So this is a great book. It's free as a PDF to download. Here you go. Here's the URL. You can also purchase it if you'd rather have a book to sit around. And if you go to any of my programs, chances are I've given you one. I've given out many, many copies, and so have a lot of other educators. So if you can't find one and you really need it, a hard copy, just contact your extension educator and chances are he or she will have it for you. So now I'd like to throw up a poll. I'm sorry, did you put up the first poll, Felicia?
No, I have not.
Oh, I was hoping you'd do it at the beginning. That's what I was saying. Okay, so let's just do the second poll. If you could throw that up. And this is asking you about your practices. I don't know who says what, so there's no name determination here. I just want to know, what type of cover crops do you think is best for your garden based on your needs? And all right, so I think we'll just use this for a point of discussion. So you can see, so legumes are the top, like I said, they're most popular. They are the coolest crop out there. To think they can fix nitrogen. I mean, like us playing basketball and being able to make our own lunch while we play basketball. I mean, that's phenomenal. And so it's a double win. We've got just roots, but we have roots doing a super duper job of making nitrogen. And then grasses are important, especially in sandy soils. In the western part of Michigan, we have a lot of sandy soils. That's where all of our asparagus is grown. And because of that, but it's a challenge, you know, you're losing your topsoil with every time it blows. And some people call it blow sand, which is pretty horrific. So they grow grasses as cover crops and as buffer crops to break the wind. And forbs, you see it a little bit. Sunflowers, you know, it's often with people who have a lot of deer or a lot of land. So they'll plant the sunflowers and such on the exterior edges of their field for the beneficials, and the deer, beneficial insects and deer to detract them from eating the crops. And brassicas are I mean, when I was a master's at Penn State 100 million years ago, we were working on brassicas for the biofumigation, and we still don't have a good handle on it. In 1940s, Germany was working on it. So it's been worked on forever. We still don't really understand it because there's so many microbes out there. We really don't know exactly who is the good guy and who's the bad guy. We don't know how many species there are because it depends on what you feed them, right? If you have a lot of diversity out there. And then mixtures, lots of energy is going into understanding mixtures. I'm on a research project now. We're looking at mixtures. People want to get most bang for the buck for that window of time when they have to put a cover crop in. And with our crazy climate right now, and probably for the rest of our lives, it's a way to hedge your bets. You get a crop that germinates quickly, that's good because it might be too cold in 2 weeks for it to germinate and establish. But if I have a quick germinator in there, it will get at least a chance to grow. Whereas I might get a summer that just goes on to the middle of November. So I'm going to get a slow but steady cover crop in that mixture. So you see how having mixtures can kind of reduce your challenges with climate change. And then, would you use a tool? All right, well, that's what we're going to do next. I think we're going to give it a whirl and see how it goes. And, I hope this works. But the biggest need is nitrogen always in organic, and weed management is always a big issue. And so that's why I think legumes are so popular, and we need a mixture so we get good soil coverage, that good canopy to keep those weeds from being a nuisance. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Is everybody comfortable with that, I hope? All right. And then, share results. Well, we saw the results pretty much. So we went over this. And I think the results, I really appreciate those who are able to, who did take the time to do it, and those who didn't have success, I'm very sorry. All right, so this is a cover crop selections tool. Oh dear. And then you choose if it's for a row crop or a vegetable crop. Then you can choose your location. Now, granted, this has been specifically made for the Midwest. Midwest Cover Crop Council has made this, but you can still use it as a guide to look at different objectives. Well, maybe she's not going to give me the opportunity, but I guess I could have just copied and pasted pages. So it asks you your goals. It asks you, is it for weed management or hard pan breaking or water holding capacity? It asks you your location, and it shows windows of time based on your location when you can grow what. And it has everything from frost seeding to spring seeding and fall seeding if it's appropriate for that crop. And so it's a real nice guide. Like I said, I know it's not for the whole US yet. There's a lot of cover crop councils that are working. I know there's one in the Southwest, like Arizona, and I know there's some over in North Carolina, they're working on it. So we have them, they're happening, but you can still use this as a guide and consider your zone and the temperature difference between that zone and the zone that, the most closest zone to you that you have. But even if you didn't use it as a tool to pick your cover crop, it shows you what are the things you need to consider before choosing your cover crop variety that you're going to use, your whether it's going to be a mustard or a legume or a mixture or oats or sorghum Sudan grass. Sorghum Sudan grass is a great weed suppressor. It grows fast. It winter kills in the northern areas. And it's the only tricky part is you have to, as an organic farmer, you have to order the seed early because a lot of that seed is treated with an insecticide. Okay, so I wanted to share some resources, and you'll have these, right? So should we copy and paste them in the chat, Felicia?
Let's see.
Just copy, paste, and then throw them in the chat. And then if people want them, go ahead and you copy them and put them on a document so that you have them for a later time. But this also will be shared as a link after you watch this program. And these are a collection of everything from estimating how much nitrogen are you going to get from your cover crop, whether it's a legume or a mixture. What's your soil like? This is, yes, it's for Wisconsin. We use it in Michigan. And it's, like I said, it's just values. And that value you put down, they don't. So it's your values are what you see in your soil color, soil, how you do a soil texture using your hands and a little bit of water. And a lot of these have different approaches to similar things, but you pick what works for you. Organic fertilizer and cover crop calculator. That's a tool that is nice to figure out about how much fertilizer you get. But like I said, that book, SARE, Managing Cover Crops Profitably book, has a lot of that expected nitrogen return. Of course, it's not going to be exact because depends on how well it grows, depends on your soil, depends on your climate. There's a phone app that's fun. And if you do any things with teaching beginner farmers or teaching youth about their soil, it's a fun tool because it's on the phone. You know, kids, God forbid, they don't have their phone in front of them. But it's a tool that you dig a hole together and then you look at the different layers of soil to assess, is it about its drainage capacity, about how well its color, so that indicates your nitrogen, your organic matter. And so it's a great learn your soil tool, great for beginner farmers. And then Midwest Cover Crop Council is where you saw that selector tool that I shared with you. And then I have a website that has a lot of these tools already on it, but also other information about organic. And that's the website I host, michiganorganic.msu.edu. And then there's a decision tool handout page to help you select a single cover crop. So there's many tools out there, and I've reviewed these, and I feel they offer good value. And they're not, even though they might have a state's name in it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's only valuable for that particular state. So I think that's kind of all I have to share. I have other things to share, but I didn't want to overwhelm you with things like how a legume works and such. But we can talk about anything that you have specific questions on. And these are kind of just to remind you, what are the values, the virtues of cover crops? What can they do? So with that, I'd like to thank you for your presence and ask if you have any questions.
Thanks, Ms. Vicki. We appreciate you so much in the presentation. We do have questions. Our first question that come in was, why can't edibles be used for cover crops?
So edibles can be used for cover crops. If you remember, for example, let's take string beans. String beans are a legume. They have roots. We know the value of roots. And you won't get as much return to your soil. Typically, what I've done when I was working in California on a farm, I had cowpea or black-eyed pea, same thing. We planted twice the amount that we needed, and in a pretty compact, dense to keep weeds down. And then we turned every other row into the soil, just as it started to flower. That's an important thing about, if you're going to use it as a cover crop, you want to turn it in just as it starts to flower. Because remember, when it's flowering, it's initiating that pod, that seed pod. It's saying, oh, it's time to make seed. Okay, take all my energy from my roots and send it up to that seed. Well, you want that energy to go into the soil. You want it to stay in the roots. So catching your cover crop just as it starts to flower, turn it in. And that's when you get the most bang for your buck for the soil. For you, of course, for harvest, for food, you want the flower to set a nice bean and grow a nice, mature, plump bean. But it's depends on if you want to share 50-50, if you want to put commitment into, okay, this year, this row is going to get a really good cover crop because I need to reduce my weeds. I need to build some nitrogen. So if you take stuff off the field, you're taking nitrogen off the field. And we saw in that poll, nitrogen was like the number one need out of a cover crop value, what's needed in the field. So it's, of course, your decision, but if you can afford to pull off that crop, you know, then but you will lose some nitrogen value to your field.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Our next question is, do you have examples of cover crops for warmer climates or summer months?
Yes. Buckwheat and sorghum Sudan grass are your two really good options. Cowpea is a great cover crop. Millet, finger millet, pearl millet, probably pearl millet is definitely better, but Japanese millet has been shown to deter nematodes even. So your millets, sorghum Sudan grass, which the trade name is called Sudex, Sudex, and it is a nice, fast-growing vegetative that can be fed to animals once it reaches a couple feet high. You do not want to let animals go in and graze it to the ground or to cut it when it's too short, because there's some chemicals in there that can be toxic to animals. So if you do want to work with sorghum Sudan grass, make sure you talk to your extension educator to be sure to don't hurt your animals. So those are really good crops for, but any of them can be grown. Say, for example, your mustards, they can be grown. You can plant them on Christmas if you're way down south, right? And then you have something over winter. For here in Michigan, like on our hoop houses, we can't grow in January, February because of light limiting. But if we have a hoop house, but down there, do you have, what's limiting for you? I mean, maybe somebody from who asked this question, maybe you want to share a little bit about your environment.
Miss Angela, would you like to unmute yourself? Let's see.
You just click on the little microphone.
She may not be on here. I don't see her name.
Oh, okay.
So she may have left.
Oh yeah, 3 people left.
So is it possible to maintain organic classification if crop rotation included small ruminants?
Yes, so that's a really good question, because here I'm not going to talk about food safety, but if you are producing more than $25,000 a year, be sure to talk to your extension educator about food safety. But in terms of organic certification, you cannot have animals on your land. I mean, you must have your animals off your land so that you have 120 days between the last time the animal pooped and the first harvest. That's about the best way to put it. So if you say, for example, you after you took your tomatoes off and then you wanted to put your chickens down to clean up the residue and enjoy the grubs and help you reduce those grubs, you put them on from October to December. And then after December, you have 120 days. So that's 369, it's 4 months. So January, February, March, April. You're not going to harvest anything before April 30th. So you've got that 120 days covered of no animals on your land before you first harvest, not planting, but first harvest. So say, for example, you planted your tomatoes on May 1st and they take about 70 days before you get any fruit, depending on 70 to 90 days, depending on the variety. So if you did May 1st, that's 7, 3, 6, that's 3 months, May, June, July, August 1st. So yeah, you have, you can have animals up to February if you plant tomatoes in May and they don't produce till August 1st, they don't harvest till August 1st. So yeah, there's lots of time. You just have to write things down, keep track of it, and it's allowed. That's true for raw manure if you're hauling it from another farm. That's true if you have compost that was just heaped. Last week we talked about compost that was just basically manure sitting. That's considered manure in the organic world. And so, but it's the 120 days are the rules for short crops like tomatoes or vegetables or, but apples, big tree crops is 90 days. Apples, pears, plums, peaches, nectarines, apricots, those guys that are nice big trees that are well off the ground.
Great. And I wanted to add too with that, I may be understanding you as well. Like when we plant our cover crop, I know Ms. Vicki, some of our farmers don't want to definitely use chemicals to, kill that cover crop or what have you. And then may not even want to use organic type, amendments. And so they let the animals go in and eat. And so I don't know if that's what this person is referring to. But as Ms. Vicki has said, that's definitely okay, as long as you're writing it down and keeping up with your dates.
And make sure you have 120 days between the time they vacated to the first harvest.
Yep. Yes, because I know they spoke, specifically about small ruminants. And so, yes, I've done that many times. I raise sheep and after a crop, sheep go in. To clean up everything very nicely for us. So, but yes, please keep up with your dates. Yeah. And also they asked, would the slides be available? So yeah. Okay.
I can share them with you after this program is ended. And no, I've put slides at the end for additional information in case somebody asks me specifically, like how does a legume work or how much nitrogen am I going to get? But you can tell which is my last slide because of thank you for your present, or thank you for any questions.
And then also I added Ms. Vicki's email address. And so either myself or her, definitely we could get the presentation to you. Just please reach out to us. And then we have a couple more questions. Is there a source of info on carbon sequestration? I always have problems saying that, for each kind of cover crop. That's the first question.
Nothing that specific. And that's kind of why I shared with you those categories: legumes, brassicas, and grasses. We understand kind of them as a group, but specifically because they vary so much from site to site, from location to location, and from variety to variety. There's no way to be so specific. And so, but we do have them by groups, and that you'll find even in that Cover Crops Profitably book, that if you don't have enough internet to do that, sneak up into a McDonald's parking lot and download it, because it's worth it. And it's a great PDF. And I like PDFs over books sometimes because I can do a search. I do Control F, I type in the word soil sequestration, and boom, whatever soil
yes.
sequestration comes. Then we have the information right there without having to do too much searching. But every time you do search it by, just looking through it at the coffee table, you find something like, oh, that makes sense. Now I understand that. Or, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to give that a try in my field.
Yes. Yeah. Now, Ms. Vicki, can you repeat the PDF? Is it something that I could grab and throw in the chat?
Yeah, sure.
Or is it too big to down?
Too big. It's that SARE, Sustainable Ag Research Extension.
The book?
Yes.
Oh, I already put it in there. Okay, I got it.
So you guys have that, and really that is a great book. And then if you want specifics for your area, And then there's the decision tool. Like I said, use that decision tool even if you don't live in the Midwest, because it shows the key points that you want to address when you're choosing your cover crops. And then when you think you have a choice, call the dealers who sell the seed, whether it's Johnny's Selected Seed, whether it's Albert Lee. They all will talk, they believe in organic. That's their, and the more they talk and sell you something, the more cha-ching they have, right? So it's in their benefit. But I feel those two companies especially do a great job of talking with the customers, not to the customers. And it's a real nice change from marketing.
And I would add one company, and maybe not necessarily customer service. I'm not saying it's bad, but they do get to the point and just, most of their customers know what they want, is Welter Seeds. Are you familiar with them, Ms. Vicki?
Yes, they're very good too.
They are very good. I like them because in our area, I am, of course, in the South, and most of our feed stores are going to sell you seeds that are in 50-pound bags. Yes. So when you're doing cover crop or, and I have done perennial, I do a perennial stuff because I don't like doing it every year. And so, but this particular company, and it may be more, Ms. Vicki can speak to that, will break it down for you based upon how much acreage you have. So you don't have to buy a 50-pound bag of just say white clover or what's the other one? Hairy vetch. You may only need 10 pounds of hairy vetch. It's those smaller seeds, and you only need a small portion of it based upon your acreage. So I really, really was thankful for them because it didn't mess my pocketbook up. I really was able to get exactly what I needed.
And the other way around it is if you get a group of 4 or 5 farmers, you can, collaborate together. If you're in the same geographical area, chances are you can benefit from, if you're going to do a mix, say everybody's going to do a mix of barley and something else, and so at least you buy the 50-pound bag of barley, and you save quite a bit when you buy that bulk.
Yeah. And then again, I said perennial, but I do perennial pasture mix. So I'm not necessarily doing cover crop. I'm strictly giving the nutrients within the different grasses, legumes, and forests for my sheep to eat. So I'm giving them the nutrient, and I just want to do it perennial. I just don't want to do it every year, but it's different than a quote unquote cover crop, even though some of them are considered cover crop. I just, they're there for forage purposes only. Ma'am?
They're dual usage, those.
Yes, definitely. Other questions is, do you know of corn farmers planting into white clover?
No, planting into. So I'm familiar with the red clover and Dutch clover. Well, yes, I am. Yes, and that white clover tends to be more durable in terms of tolerating that foot traffic and even tractor traffic. And you may lose some, and some farmers, the way they do that is they'll plant the whole field in the cover crop, so the whole field benefits. And then they go through, and it's called ridge tillage, and so they go through and say, even if you had a cultivator, you make rows just wide enough for your crop, and you leave the white clover there. So you cultivate the width of your row for your corn, and then you plant it into that, and you leave your white clover growing. The trick might be, if your white clover is pretty high when you're growing, when you're planting, you may need to mow it to make sure that your corn has enough opportunity to grow and get light. Because if the clover is this tall and your little seedling is down here, it's going to suffer.
Thank you. And our next question is, what cover crop requires the least amount, and I believe it's of moisture? I hope I said that right, Miss Nadine, but it seems like, what cover crop would you suggest that does, can do well maybe in hotter climates, maybe even some drought situations?
Sure. Millet.
That's what I meant, was it tolerates more drought.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Anything there.
I would say definitely millets. I was Peace Corps in Niger, West Africa, and you have not seen a desert until you've been to Niger. It is hot, dry, and the number one crop that is grown there is millet. Millet is a drought-tolerant C4 plant that does fine in the hot climate, sandy soils, lower moisture, way lower moisture. Of course, everything grows better with a little bit of water, and it needs some water. But if you get enough water to get it established, it has good roots that go deep, finding the water that's deeper down, and it doesn't require a lot of water. So I would suggest that your millets. But one thing to keep in mind, if you're growing millet for a cover crop, you want to grow it in enough density so that it's competing against the weeds. Because the idea of a cover crop is you plant it, you let it grow, then you terminate it. Whether you cultivate it, whether you mow it, whether you weed whack it, whether you bring in the sheep to eat it, it's a form of termination, but that's all you should be doing. You should not weed your cover crops. And so that's why it's important to get that good establishment initially and have your soil bed prepped nicely. If it requires a little bit of nitrogen, if you're really low in phosphorus or nitrogen, then go ahead and put that in. And then, oh, here we
No,
are.
finish, Miss Vicki.
No, I didn't do that.
No,
The
yeah.
NCAT did. So here, Curragh clover is also, if you go down in the blues, those are your legumes, and you go down in the first row, we have Curragh clover. It survives here in Michigan, but it's not very happy. But once it's established, it's established, and it'll grow well in the South. Teff over here in the far right, a grass. Teff is food of Ethiopia, and it grows well in heavy soil. I went to Ethiopia once. I lost my boots in a teff field because the soil, quote unquote, grabbed my boots and pulled them off. But the teff was gorgeous, and it's a beautiful crop. Beautiful, very willowy and waves with the winds. Lab is also a semi-arid tropical crop, but it's a legume, and it produces edible. There are edible labs. Americans might not like it, but I know it from Tanzania when I worked there. And then let's see if it's on here. Okay, I don't see it. So things like lentils and chickpeas, they'll grow in a climate. But if you want them to produce food, they're a little finicky. You see them out in Washington State, Oregon. They need sort of like that cooler evenings and really specialized climate, but they'll grow fine in the South for vegetation, which is what you're shooting for in your
Definitely
in your cover crops. And of course, peanut and mung bean, definitely. Yep. And jack bean. There's the pearl millet, and you've got your foxtail millet and proso millet, and they don't have the Japanese millet, but Japanese millet has been shown for its nematode resistance, deterrence, and grain sorghum. Sorghum is definitely a semi-arid tropical crop. Remember, tropic doesn't necessarily mean rainfall, it means temperature. So when I say semi-arid tropics, that means it's pretty dry and it's hot.
Yes.
And then of course, Sudan grass, which is part of the sorghum Sudan grass. So, yeah.
I wanted to share it because we had the question about what warm cover crops.
Sure.
And this is my go-to chart when I'm speaking on cover crops. And so it just gives you an opportunity to see what is considered cover crop. And then it has the cool, have the warm. It tells you if it's a grass. It tells you it's a broadleaf. It tells you if it's a legume. So I really love this cover crop chart.
What I like to see, I think it's good to point out, you see the line, there's cool. And so on the right-hand side, starting with cowpea, on to the right is your warm. And then, but I think also some of these legumes could be definitely categorized as warm as well. And then we have the broadleaf, which are something to consider in terms of weed competition, and then grasses for its roots and legumes for its nitrogen. And then, but notice these droplets of water that she mentioned, that she knows which ones are happy with the drought.
Yes.
Amaranth, and then quinoa
Yep.
is okay, but sunflower needs quite a bit of moisture. So if that's a challenge for you, then don't grow sunflower. But maybe, and then I'm surprised. I guess the proso millet takes more, if there's more branching than a pearl millet. So that's why, but I'm surprised.
And then like Ms. Vicki said about dual or triple use, you know, these are, I love these because they can be utilized in so many various ways. And so the millet, chickens love millet. So, you know, you could grow them, but you know, as a cover crop or use it as a feed. And it's just so many things on this chart that could be utilized. You heard me speak of nutrients, making sure my animals are up to par and getting their nutrient intake. And so I'm big on doing mustards and collards and turnips in the perennial mix. I do that because they love it. They love it. And so those are types of things that you throw in there. But I wanted you to, you know, make sure you look this up. And then I'm a firm believer in doing like small little plots. So if you're unfamiliar with any of these, do small little plots. It can 4 by 4. I mean, it could be a small little area to see will it grow one in your microclimate, because you could be in a particular state, but you still on your land, your farm, you will have a microclimate. For an example, Miss Vicki spoke about alfalfa. And see, it's only a handful of farmers can grow alfalfa in Mississippi. It's where they are in the state, because most of us cannot grow alfalfa. We have to just buy it outright. We can't grow it.
Takes too much water, yeah. So it'd be cool if they did something with temperature that shows. I'd love to annotate this and say, show which ones are will end up producing seed. For example, in Michigan, sorghum Sudan grass will not produce seed because we don't have long enough days. Whereas down south, it could. And that's an important factor, especially for organic, because you've got to really make sure to get it. You can't count on that winter kill. You have to make sure you cut it or, you know, mow it or do something or feed it before it produces that seed. So, you know, you've got sheep though, and sheep, well, they'll eat anything.
Yeah, yeah. But it's the small ruminants, because even I always try to share with people, we forget about the rabbits. They're small ruminants too. We usually only think about the sheep and the goat, but we do have, you know, producers that raise rabbits. I mean, that's a good cash crop. I mean, rabbits. And so we forget about them, but those are types of animals that could be, you know, put on this type of forage. And it really, it changes the game when it comes to lessening your feed bill. But again, you have to be, you know, organized, like Ms. Vicki said, putting down your dates and so forth for when you're doing these types of things. Because if you move to a total grass, you know, based system, you got to stay on top of it and so forth to make sure it's always foraged there. But I just wanted to briefly share that with everyone because it could definitely be needed in your system. Is there any other questions? You can unmute yourself and come on. That was all the questions in the chat, Miss Vicki.
So I'm just putting in the SARE link for a farmer rancher grant. So these questions that you are asking about, how will these cover crops respond in my soil, in my farm, in my area? This could easily be a SARE farmer rancher grant. And when they call it farmer rancher, it's just for farmers. It's not for researchers. It's not for youth educators. It's just for farmers. And if you work by yourself, you get about 6,000, depends on the region. We have 4 regions of SARE in the US, depending on your region of how much they provide, but they provide a pot of money for you to do testing the cover crops, and then inviting your community to see through sort of a field day and discuss what they've seen. And it's It's something you might be doing anyway. And if they're going to give you money to buy that seed that we talked about could be expensive, or hire a high schooler to help you get it going and paying them, it's, you know, it's a win-win. It's our tax money. You might as well use it for yourselves, not for, well, never mind. I'm not going to go.
And we appreciate you being here today. Have a great evening. Ms. Vicki, thank you so much for your time and energy and your passion for organics.
And thank you for great facilitation. I really appreciate it. And your
Yes,
patience.
ma'am. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.